Welcome back to Askewed Reviews. And throughout the year, I'm continuing to do the entire Disney animated collection that is also going to include hybrid movies where it's part live action and part animation. So today I am doing the 1941 film, The Reluctant Dragon. Here is your trivia question for today. What prop was built for this film but then became a permanent addition to the Disney studio? The answer will be at the end of this episode. So, at the beginning of our film, we meet a married couple named Mr. and Mrs. Benchley who are hanging out around their pool. Mrs. Benchley is reading a story to her husband called The Reluctant Dragon. She thinks it's so good, in fact, that she believes that they should go to the Disney studios and try to see if they can get this made into an animated feature. Mr. Benchley, who is busy shooting suction cup darts at fake ducks, believes that this is a terrible idea and that they would never go for it. But Mrs. Benchley manages to strong arm him into going to the studio to do it. In fact, once they get there, she actually just drops him off and tells him that it's up to him to bring up the idea of the book being made into an animated feature. So now it's up to Mr. Benchley to go and find Walt Disney to present the idea. It's at this point that we get a full tour of the Disney studios from Mr. Benchley's perspective as he gets to see how a cartoon is made. Everything from how the drawings are made, how the sound effects are created, where the music gets added in, how the pictures are taken, how the cells are created, where the paints come from, even how they use figurines and their own faces to design the drawings. And by the end of it, seeing how a storyboard is put together and eventually how the whole thing becomes an actual cartoon. Now, throughout the journey, we do get to see four cartoon segments: Casey Jr. about a train, Baby Weems about a baby genius, How to Ride a Horse, where Goofy teaches us how to ride a horse, and of course, the Reluctant Dragon itself. Now, by the end of this, will Mr. Benchley in fact meet Walt Disney and tell him the idea? The Casey Jr. segment involving the train would actually pop up in a variation in Disney's next film, Dumbo. In the Baby Weems segment, there is a part where we get to see Mount Rushmore. Now, of course, because it is related to the cartoon, it's not just Washington and Lincoln's face that we see, but also Baby Weems. Now, the reason that you don't see Roosevelt and Jefferson is because while this film was being made, so was Mount Rushmore. In fact, Mount Rushmore, as it is today, was not completed until October of 1941. This movie actually features the very first Goofy how to cartoon, which became insanely popular. Now, the reason that we don't actually hear Goofy's voice during any of these segments is around this time, Goofy's voice actor, Pinto Colvig, was temporarily unavailable. Now, the voice we do actually hear in this segment is narrator John McLeish. And what's funny is he was completely shocked to find out that he was narrating a Goofy cartoon. Now, instead of the Goofy How to Ride a Horse segment, originally there was going to be a Mickey Mouse one. But RKO Pictures requested that the Goofy segment be in instead. But the actual scene with Mickey would actually be reused later in the short Mickey's Birthday Party from 1942. The Reluctant Dragon segment is actually based off of a real book by Kenneth Graham. The entire Reluctant Dragon segment had to be redone, as the character originally had a belly button, and that was apparently inappropriate. The character of Sir Giles is supposed to be a caricature of Don Quixote. The sequence with Clarence Nash and Florence Gill being Donald Duck and Clara Cluck, that is actually a reenactment of the 1936 cartoon Mickey's Grand Opera. Before the movie was released, Bambi actually made their first appearance in this film. All of the Donald Duck parodies of old art pieces were originally made for an unproduced cartoon where Donald was a guard at a museum. Most of the animators shown in this were actually just actors portraying animators, and when the movie released, the actual animators were on strike. The striking animators would actually show up to picket the theaters showing this film. The way that the Robert Benchley clay sculpt was completed so quickly is they actually had a completed sculpt first and then they just destroyed it, and the destruction of it was shown in reverse. Here's something that may or may not be true involving that clay bust. Supposedly, Chuck Jones, who is very well known for working with Looney Tunes, actually owns that piece of memorabilia. So both the characters of the dragon and Sir Giles from The Reluctant Dragon do actually make an appearance in the film Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Also, when speaking about appearances of these characters, in the cartoon series Disney's House of Mouse, you can actually see the dragon, Sir Giles, and the boy all appear around a table. And now for one of my favorite segments, the dark side of Disney. There's a point in the film where Mr. Benchley is watching a bunch of the animators drawing elephants. Now, at one point, they show an Asian cartoonist who supposedly draws this. I find it a little hard to believe that she made that choice. Also, when talking about horrible racial stereotypes, you can't forget the Baby Weems segment, which shows a couple of Africans and apparently a Chinese man. So, when it comes to the film, The Reluctant Dragon, I do have to say it's kind of so so. There are some parts of it, obviously, that are kind of boring, being the fact that this is not a full animated feature, which I'm sure a lot of people were expecting. But I do have to say at the same time, it is very fascinating to see how a cartoon was made. So I think I'm going to give this one a 3 out of 5. Now, as for the trivia question from the beginning of this episode, what prop was built for this film but then became a permanent addition to the Disney studio? So originally, the signpost that shows Mickey Avenue and Dopey Drive was built just for this movie and was supposedly set to be removed right afterward. And yet, it still stands to this day at Disney Studio, at least as of this video. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Askewed Reviews, and if there's a movie you'd like to see get a review, just mention it in the comments.